Construct markets, guild halls, cathedrals, and more as you try to build the most prosperous city in era medieval age. Thanks for joining us at Tantrum House Studio D. I'm Melissa Delp.
And I'm Kevin Delp. Era Medieval Age is a game for 1 to 4 players. It uses a roll and build mechanic, and it takes about 45 minutes to play.
It's designed by Matt Leacock and published by Eggertspiele, and they gave us this copy to review. At the beginning of the game, each player will get a player board with a starting set of buildings and corresponding dice. They'll also get walls and pegs to place in their player board.
A game round consists of multiple steps. You'll roll dice behind your screen, then you'll collect resources, then there's feeding, and then there's disasters, and there's building, and then there's possibly extorting.
Or being extorted.
When rolling, you'll do it Yahtzee style behind your screen and can roll up to 3 times, unless you roll a skull, and then that die is locked.
Players then reveal their dice by lifting up their screens and collect the resources shown on their dice. You'll advance the pegs on the corresponding tracks.
Then all players have to feed by spending 1 food for each die they own.
During the disasters step, you resolve any of the skulls showing on your dice. The number dictates the result. Losing points by advancing on the disaster track, removing buildings, or even giving scorched areas to your opponents. So it's not always bad for you. Then in turn order, players can build a number of buildings up to the number of hammers showing on their dice.
Your player screen shows all the different types of buildings that can be bought if you have the right resources. Some will give you more dice to roll, produce more resources, or provide endgame points.
During the extort step, in player order you look at the number of swords and shields you rolled and compare it to the others. If you have more swords than an opponent, and they don't have enough shields to defend, you beat them. You request a resource from them, and they have to either give it to you or lose 2 points.
It's interesting because in one round I might extort 2 people, but also might get extorted, but then in other rounds there might not be that much extortion because everyone's equal.
When you take the last building of a type, you reveal an X on one of the tracking tokens. When all the tokens for your player count show X's, the game will end when the round is over.
Now you count your points. You'll get points for all your buildings. If you have a completed walled area, then every building inside the wall is multiplied by 2. Then you'll score bonuses off buildings like the guild hall that gives you a point for every remaining resource. And the university gives a point for every culture. Those are the book icons rolled in the game. There's also points for the most culture and most walled, and then negative points based on your disaster track.
The person with the most points wins. Now, to me, this feels a little bit like a roll and write.
I definitely agree.
But it has the 3-dimensionality with the buildings that you're putting on your board. Strategy-wise, it's really up to you what you build and how you manage your resources. Do you go heavy on the food so you can make all those feedings? Or are you okay with a little bit of starvation in order to collect other resources to build some of those big buildings?
Now you are limited a little bit on what you can build by what you roll, and a little bit on what's available as well. There's the lumber mill, and there's only 3 of them, and it usually goes out really quick, or people build that one first because it's a good resource for wood. Now, you can also get some major points in the game by walling in your city, so you shouldn't wait till the last minute to do that.
I know this from personal experience. There was one game where I had all the resources that I need to build my last walls, but I didn't roll any hammers. So I could not build them. It ended up being the last round of the game. I did not complete the wall of my city, did not score double points for any of my buildings, and my score was like half of everyone else's.
Now you can mitigate that risk a little bit by building the monastery, because that lets you set one of your dice, and there's also the white dice that has a reroll side.
The player screens are helpful, but you also have the back of the rulebook that explains all the buildings.
One of our friends thinks the winning strategy is to build 2 guild halls within a walled city, that gives you more points for the resource side. It's 2 points for every resource, so he really pushes his resources up. But there are ways to get more points, like building a market, and that could get you like 10 points for each market that you build.
Yeah, a lot of those end round buildings will get you points different ways. I think when our friend Ben is doing the Guildhall strategy, that we need to really extort him.
Yeah, maybe build some more keeps so you're rolling more gray dice.
Right, so either he's losing resources or losing points to us. Now, that is something in the game, is the interaction. I personally usually like less interaction in games. This one has the gray dice that have the swords and the shields for the extortion, and then also the skulls, which can do some of the disasters. What I do like, though, is that each color die has a different types of faces on it. So by what you build, the choices that you make, you're collecting different colored dice, and you can, set your strategy in different ways. The white dice have a lot of the books, and there's a building that gives you points for those. So I think that's really interesting.
The buildings are pretty cool, but one complaint is the player boards. It's hard to see the different icons. Our friend Pete Shirey not only painted the player boards, but also all the buildings, and they came out pretty nice.
As far as roll and writes go, this is going to be on the more expensive side, but it really is more than a roll and write with these 70-ish plastic buildings. So maybe roll and build is a better term for it. I have enjoyed playing this game. I like the strategy of trying to figure out which buildings to build and when to press my luck on those rolls. But I do get a little frustrated sometimes with the dice rolls. Like I said, that time I didn't roll any hammers. And then there is that interaction with the skull dice with the other players.
Yeah, there was one game where I kept rolling dice and there were 3 skulls. And that means I'm giving scorched earths to all the other players. And Melissa's board was filled with all these scorched earths.
Yeah, and there was nothing I could do about it. It's not like the extortion where I can at least roll more swords or more shields. With the skulls, there's not really anything you can do when someone else is rolling them and they get a number that is going to affect you, like the scorched earth or even destroying buildings, stuff like that. So just know that there is that type of interaction in the game.
I like this game for a number of reasons. One, I like it that you can bring to a community game night. It has a really good table presence, and it's really easy to pick up and learn. Eggertspiele, they're saying this is the spiritual successor to Roll Through the Ages. So if you're familiar with that one, you might like this one as well. If you like spatial puzzles, if you like city building, if you like that simultaneous play, then you'll probably like Era. Check it out, Era Medieval Age from Eggertspiele. And we would love for you to subscribe to Tantrum House. Disasters.
That was a disaster. And then in turn... Sorry. My hands! What do I do with my hands? Just put them down. Then in turn order... Pillars...
Pillagers.
Wrong game.